Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One with pico and creamy chipotle ranch, and the other with bacon and avocado ranch. Chicken expert since 1990. Taco expert since now. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.
We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 163. I'm your host, Chris Webster, with my co-host, Paul Zimmerman. Today we talk about maker culture. That's all things 3D, robots, drones, and computers. Let's get to it. All right. Welcome to the show, everybody. Paul, how's it going?
It is going all right. I'm still unemployed, which is, a little jarring, but I am keeping myself very busy. I mean, I've been doing a lot of work for you with GIS stuff, which has been a lot of fun, actually. It was good to be able to step up into that role for a little bit here. And, I'm keeping busy with stuff from the school that I used to work at, helping them with some programs. Something blew up and I'm like, oh, it blew up 2 years ago. I had a script that we could work around with that. So I had to train the new guy in on how to use this cheap hack script that I wrote. So I'm keeping busy with a variety of different things. How you doing, Chris? And where are you?
Yeah, the eternal question, right? So we are currently in Coburg, Oregon, which nobody knows where that is, but it's right outside of Eugene, Oregon, which a lot of people know where that's at. One of the big maintenance facilities for our brand of RV. Now, there's lots of RV technicians around, but one of the big factory maintenance facilities is right here in Coburg, Oregon. The other one is in Elkhart, Indiana, which is like the home of motorhomes in the United States. And we just had some, when you live in a space like this, there's always things that just build up. And we've had some things that weren't critical, but were needed to be dealt with. And we wanted the pros to do it. And we just happened to be coming down from Washington. And I knew this was going to be our schedule. So I actually booked this appointment about 2 months ago because it's really difficult it's difficult to get in here. And I knew we were going to be coming through here around this time. And then we're heading down to Reno for the Reno Air Races, which I always work with my Civil Air Patrol Squadron. And then hopefully a little bit of vacation if, all is still well. Our vacation is in South Lake Tahoe, which nearly burned down and was evacuated last week, but everybody's been let back in. So I think it's going to be okay. It might be a little smoky, but we'll just stay in the house. It's a nice big house. I'll just be happy to not be having client meetings. To be honest, I don't care where I'm at. So
good.
Yeah.
A little downtime.
There you go. So today's topic, it's just called maker culture. And honestly, Paul and I have we use Trello to organize everything, and we just have a board of episode ideas where things are just kind of scribbled down as they come to us that we may turn into future episode topics. And I was actually looking through it. We didn't have anything for today, specifically planned out last week. So I was looking through stuff and I saw this one, and I saw your quick thoughts on what this would be, and I kind of ran with it and set up some segments and started getting some links and taking some notes. We don't often have a ton of links for this podcast, but I've got 9 links in there right now. It's a lot of good stuff to check out.
Yeah, no, I was glad that when you first brought me on as a co-host on this podcast, you gave me access to the Trello, and I put a whole bunch of cards with just little 1 sentence, 2 sentence, off the top of my head, what might be a good topic. And so maker culture, I didn't even know what I wanted to discuss about it. But at the time, STEM, STEAM, maker spaces, Raspberry Pis, all this stuff was really current. I was like, is this kind of, to me, exciting subculture in the U.S., is this going to have any direct impact on archaeology? I put it in there just, maybe we could explore it, maybe we could have a conversation about it. And then as you were going back through these, you came at me with a, hey, which is exactly, I think, what I was initially intending. I just wanted to be a pretty kind of open-ended discussion, maybe some good examples if we had any, but to see how these tools and techniques and programming languages and whatever else people are gravitating toward. And, now it's a couple of years gone from when I first put that down, and things have changed, but I think it's still a valid question to explore.
Yeah, been a couple of years. Trello records everything that you do in the activity log. And I didn't think about it until you said you added this a while ago. You added this card on August 24th, 2017. That was almost exactly 4 years ago. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was part of that initial big brain dump. I think I put about 20 cards in there just as stub ideas for future episodes. And I did that because I don't know if you recall, but when you first had me on, you interviewed me, and we had the interview actually as one of the episodes. And I said that I, for a number of years, had been wanting to start a podcast with one of my old friends from my grad student days. And that never took off, but it did mean I had this whole list of different, half-baked ideas. And this was one of them, I think.
Nice. Well, I have got what the quick ideas that you put together. I kind of broke those up into 3 segments. And segment 1, we're going to talk about basically 3D scanning and printing. Segment 2 will be all about robots and drones. Take a drink. And for segment 2, you might want to just go get the bottle. So
you might want to dilute it with a lot of water.
Yeah. Make sure you're not driving while you're listening to this episode. And then segment 3 is kind of we'll get to segment 3, but Paul titled it. I titled it actually based on stuff, art, experimentation, and whimsy. So we will dive into the recesses of Paul's mind for that one and what you were thinking on that. I see some good notes in here. I know, right? So let's jump into 3D scanning and printing. And one of the things, anytime I think of 3D scanning and printing and who's doing stuff with this space, and it might just be because I follow him on Instagram. I've seen the person who runs this outfit many times at conferences. His name is Bernard, and the Virtual Curation Laboratory at Virginia Commonwealth University. And first off, their Instagram is fantastic because they put a lot of cool 3D printed things up there. But not only do they scan stuff in 3D, and they get called out to scan things from clients, essentially. They get hired out to do this stuff and then produce replicas. And he's got a whole bunch of students that are there working in the lab, and they sand down the artifacts, and then they primer it, and they paint it, and they try to make these things look a lot like as close as possible to the original artifact, and they just do such a good job.
You scared me for a moment when you said they sand down the artifacts. I'm like, wait, what?
Oops, not the replica artifacts.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
There you go. Yeah. And the other thing that I actually kind of recently discovered, because I've just followed him on socials, is their website. I mean, it's a blog-based website, but they've got like step-by-step instructions on how to do that on your own. They often put up blueprints for if you want to 3D print something that they've already scanned, they'll put up the print for it, and you can just download that and print it yourself. And then they'll give you step-by-step instructions on how to prepare it and paint it and, finish it and make it look good. So it's just a really well done outfit for not only getting something done, but using that opportunity to teach other people how to do it.
Yeah, no, it's a great resource. I love projects like this, and we're seeing it more and more that they're experimenting. I guess that gets into this maker culture bit, and then turning around and explaining what worked, what didn't work, how you can replicate things on your own. And a lot of the links that you chased down for this episode are in the same vein. So I think that kind of gets to the heart of what I was thinking of when I was saying maker culture. And I know culture is a terrible term for it, but it's floated around like that. That this experimentation and sharing of one's successes and failures that I think is cool.
It is super cool. And for anybody kind of unaware of how 3D scanning works, because you have to typically scan something in 3 dimensions before you can print something in 3 dimensions, because printing in 3 dimensions requires a distinct shape. And you can make shapes in different applications like Tinkercad. That's a free one. And there's a number of ones. I've used Tinkercad, and it's actually pretty easy to learn how to use Tinkercad. And then you can export that.
With kids at school.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Tinkercad is super fun. And they've got a lot of stuff that you can just kind of start with, too, and pull in, and shapes and all kinds of stuff. And learning how to add shapes together and adding one shape to another in order to like remove something, the absence of something, using a shape, like making a donut style sphere. You create the sphere first and then put a rod through it and then make the rod a negative space and then just remove that from the sphere, something like that. But it's really cool. It's really neat. I actually, when we first got a 3D printer that we had use of at my co-working space a few years ago, I took the Archaeology Podcast Network logo and brought it into Tinkercad and made it 3 dimensions and then printed up like a plastic coaster, basically. That was the APN logo. It makes you think about certain things like, and the APN logo, the letters aren't technically connected right? If you just look at the logo, and you can't print like that. So I ended up printing something that was solid with the letters taken out of the solid, so holes where the letters are rather than the letters themselves. Otherwise you got to connect them in some way. And the logo just doesn't work out that way, but it makes you think about stuff like that. So
that's funny. When
fun exercise.
Yeah, when I first got my 3D printer last year, one of the things I did was I took this little design that I've turned into a sticker and I put everywhere for my kind of like personal branding and printed it out. And I had the same thing. I made a coaster and then rather than and the design itself is etched down into it. It's not actually etched because it's printed. So it's just the negative space where it would be if it was carved out. But yeah, it's funny. Maybe that's a rite of passage when you get one of these 3D printers in your hands.
Yeah, who knows, right? So 3D scanning and printing is becoming more of a useful tool. And I think when I think of it in the context of CRM and in the context of the type of archaeology that we do in the West, and Paul, you were on one of these projects with us over the summer. The way I think about this, and I'm curious at your take on this now that you were out there, is there a comfortable way, do you think, anything you've seen? I know we're not 3D scanning aficionados here, but we've seen a few things. But I wonder if it would be feasible to take out into the field one of those handheld 3D scanners that's battery powered and scan the artifacts that we leave in place. If that would just take too much time, or if that would be a thing that we could do,
Yeah, I think it would depend really on the resolution of it. And that's something I don't know. I mean, those handheld scanners run into big bucks, $10,000 really quickly. Interesting that you'd ask this, though. The things that I was most interested in, that I would most like to still be able to look at and turn around, are things like we found certain can lids that were embossed. Right.
Yeah.
And we could barely see what the design was. But I know that if I knew what those cans were, I'd be able to figure it out in short order. Well, now they're still sitting on the back of a mountain, in Nevada. But if I had a 3D scan that was sufficiently detailed, I could play with that some, maybe do some RTI with it to try to figure out what that embossed design was. That would be cool. Yeah. So that would be something that I would want to see, but it's entirely dependent on the resolution. But it's interesting that you would go this way because there was the RPA had a grant open for equipment for $1,000, 10 different $1,000 grants. So I applied at the IAIS museum where I volunteer. Just got email yesterday that we didn't win the grant. So, but I was looking into it because Paul Wegner was asking me to experiment with some photogrammetry, because we have at the museum a whole lot of things from old excavations that were just deposited there and have never been properly analyzed. Not so much as cataloged. I mean, it's on the paper that's on the box that's in storage, but it's from 78 or 77 or something like that, and so nobody has ever really looked at them. And because not everybody that would be working on these things can be co-located, he was like, well, if we could get sufficiently detailed 3D scans of these things quickly, we could then, allow our researchers dispersed to take a look at them and to at least do basic measurements. And so I looked into it, and for the grant, I'd written up we needed some more photography equipment because there isn't any really good photo setup, and I wanted to do that because I love photography. But that only accounts for a couple $100, good backdrop and good lights. And I was looking at handheld scanners. And again, most of them are way expensive, $8,000 plus dollars. But there is a certain class of these ones that are sub $1,000 now. And I looked at a whole bunch of them and saw different reviews. And one, I'm going to put a link into it. I was hoping to get it to find out if it's any good at all. It's called the RevoPoint Pop, and it's about a $550 handheld scanner. And I thought that would work nicely, put an object on a turntable, spend a few minutes and have it scan things. The examples I've seen both from the company and from other people's reviews of the product are really promising. So maybe we might be at the cusp. This particular one was interesting too, because the other ones were tied to either to very expensive photogrammetry software or very proprietary stuff that only ran on Windows with, a very good GPU. Sure. But this one had even applications to run on iOS. So you could connect the scanner to your iPhone and do that, record it right there, which would then work in that case that you were suggesting, going out into the field with these things.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we didn't win the grant, and so I'm not going to be able to tell you if this product is really any good or not. But my phone, you remember all the trouble I was having with my phone in the field, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So it finally died, like dead. So as of today, I have an iPhone 12, which I know the 13s are coming out imminently. But so maybe I'll play with some of those LiDAR scanning apps on this to see what kind of detail I can get. But I'm wondering, with all the availability of 3D models that I see on places like Sketchfab, how are people doing those? Is everybody sprung for these expensive scanners, or is there, or are they doing a lot of just structure for motion work and taking a zillion photographs, or is it a combination, or is there something that I just didn't look while I was, didn't find while I was doing my research?
Well, I personally think that a lot of the stuff that's getting done right now are getting done in an academic setting. And, when you're in an academic setting and you add a $20,000 scanner to your grant proposal, or the university's already got one for some other reason, I think a lot of the
engineering department.
Exactly. So, and a lot of universities have, really good like maker spaces and stuff like that have a lot of equipment like this these days. So I think we get a skewed impression of how easy it is to do this stuff because we see those people putting stuff out like that. And we're like, oh, that looks great. I want to do it. And you're like, oh my God, it's going to be $20,000. So yeah. And then as we're wrapping up this segment here, one of the last things I was thinking about as far as field scanning goes is lighting is always an issue, right? Mm-hmm. If you're using photogrammetry, then you could probably put it on a background, twirl it around a few times, take some pictures, and the good lighting is actually an issue, a thing that you need. But in some cases, you might actually have to shade it and have, or put it inside something where it can maybe spin with its own light internally or something like that. But then, taking that into the field, I just don't think it's ready. So let's go just a hair long on this because we've got some links to check out that we're not really going to get to talk about, but I'm going to leave them in the show notes anyway. But two of the other things that I thought were really interesting, some papers that we saw using GIS plus 3D scanning for landscape archaeology. So landscape scale kind of stuff, and really getting into immersing yourself and being able to manipulate the landscape in a way that, a flat map just simply can't do. And that's pretty cool. And then the other one is immersive VR, of course. That's kind of like the dream and the gold standard, is to be able to replicate and then walk into an environment that no longer exists, whether it's a prehistoric, ancient, or yesterday, who knows? But being able to recreate that and get into the archaeological site rather than just look at notes, a map or a sketch map or something like that. So that's where it would be great to be. So anyway, some good articles about that stuff. Take a look at the show notes again. I'll structure them so you can find them by section and then, take a look at those links. So, all right, well, let's wrap up this segment and we'll give you just a couple of minutes here while we have some advertisements from, just us probably. And if you don't hear anything from any of our sponsors, then we have sponsor space open. They're dynamic, so I don't know what's going to be in there, but it depends on when you download this episode. But the next segment is robots and drones. So go get your supplies. Back in a minute. Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code Archaeotech. That's ARCHAEOTECH.
Are you ready to launch your career to new heights? Visit careers.dish.com/technician now and uncover a world of exciting opportunities waiting just for you. From cutting-edge technology to a supportive work environment, Dish has everything you need to thrive. Don't wait any longer to kickstart your next opportunity. Apply today and join the Dish family, where innovation meets opportunity. Visit us online at careers.dish.com/technician. Your future starts now.
Welcome back to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 163. And we are talking about all kinds of things in the maker and, I guess, experimental culture of archaeology. And it really just the culture in general as it's applied to archaeology. So
yeah,
this next one I'm pretty excited about. Robots and drones. Now, drones we've talked about extensively on this show, and they always come up in different spaces. So we're actually, I mean, by the notes I've got, I don't think we're going to spend like a ton of time on your standard drone applications, because I kind of feel like everybody's talking about drones. But I do want to talk about robots. And this first one, well, first off, robots in the sense that they're not even necessarily autonomous, but they're things that are doing stuff that a human either can't or would be dangerous for a human to do. And I mean, in that sense, a drone is a robot. I mean, come on. I mean, realistically. So
yeah, I can't fly.
Yeah, exactly. I can't fly either. I can, but I can't stick to landing. So, so robots are cool in a lot of cases, because depending on what you're talking about, they're generally non-destructive because they can go into places without excavation, which we're going to talk about in a minute here. They can go where it's too dangerous for humans to go. I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to go inside of a mine shaft or an adit because I just want to know what the network down there looks like, especially after it's been left to decay on its own. I think that would just be fascinating. Like what does a mine shaft look like after 100 years of just being left to its own devices? But there's no way a human could ever go in there. Like, it's just too dangerous. Not only are there things that could fall on you or crush you, or you could step on opening another shaft if you're walking through an adit, which is more horizontal. You could be walking through that and then step on a vent shaft that was sealed over with wood or something like that, which is now decayed, and then fall 1,000 feet to your death. So, that would suck. And if none of that happens, more than likely the chemical outgassing that's in there is going to kill you either way. So it's just too dangerous to do.
Yeah, no, robots, I mean, obviously we've used robots in a lot of different ways for a long time in manufacturing, since the 70s at least. But where this intersects, where it comes into this whole maker culture idea, is that, starting with probably like Lego Mindstorms, but definitely accelerating with all these different like robot soccer games and whatnot. It's become accessible that, high school kids build robots as part of their school classes. Sometimes, they enter them in competitions. They learn how to have them do different tasks. Actually, why am I saying high school kids? I mean, I've seen grade school kids, go to robot camp in the summer to learn how to program something to follow a line or to do whatever. And that's where I think this is exciting. And that's where the whole maker bit of it is. It's the availability of all these different things that used to be high end and very expensive are suddenly coming within grasp. And that's where the excitement for me is with this, is that, as somebody that likes to tinker and likes to try to invent things, it's right there. You could, you've got the tools in front of you. If you just have the time and the idea and the ability to procure these things, which isn't, tens of thousands of dollars now, but in the range of tens or hundreds of dollars, you can do something new and cool. And so, yeah, these robots, geez, a mine shaft. I didn't think of that, though. Most of the examples I think of kind of a similar form factor. Mm-hmm. Do you remember when they were looking to use robots to go into the Great Pyramids at Giza?
Yeah. Yeah, I think they've done it in some cases, haven't they?
I don't remember. I think that they were trying and they kept on having troubles, but I don't know how deep they could go. And I think part of that was restricted to the radio signals that they could get back out. I really...
Sure.
I'm just talking off the top of my head here, so it's a vague memory. But it seems to me like, if the robot isn't a big expensive thing, but something that you whip together, you send a bunch of them out. You try it.
Well, honestly, even a tethered robot with a camera on it that, if radio signal travel is your problem, then just tether the damn thing, right? As long as it's the tether is not going to get caught on anything. And I seem to have a picture in my head. It's either that or I've imagined it so many times it's real now. But I've got a picture in my head of seeing a wheeled little car style robot with cameras and lights on it going up like a narrow shaft in a pyramid. And I don't know if that's real or not, but I'm sure somebody's tried it. And you don't need radio, like I said, if it's something that you can get through. And that totally leads to the thing that when I was researching for this section, my God, I came across this thing. You guys have got to check out the show notes because the Stanford. I hope you watch these videos, Paul.
But they make me feel a little odd.
Yeah, well. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Check out the video. But there's one article that says the title is Robots Help Archaeologists to Explore Pre-Incan Ruins in Peru. And that led me to, because they had a link in there, Vine Robots. And I included a link to the vinerobots.org page in my in the show notes for this episode. So what this is, it's a stationary device that you just set on the ground, and I don't know how to explain this other than like a sausage casing or a sock turned inside out. Like if your sock is turned inside out and you put your hand in it and you push it out, you're like, if you pull your socks off and they're inside out, you push it out, as your hand goes through the middle of the sock, the end of the sock kind of comes out. Right. So, and then it forms a sock. Well, imagine that for 200-300 feet and plastic. And this plastic thing has a camera on the end of it that's pushing along with it as it's basically inflating. I don't know if that's even the right word, because they can put fluids and stuff in there too. But basically, it's being fed material from the inside and developing sort of from the inside out. Like it looks like an intestine or something like that. It's really, really strange looking, but they're able to take this thing into really narrow passageways. They're able to, they said, even from a search and rescue standpoint, they're able to like deliver things like water and stuff through that tube basically, and air for somebody who is trapped in a confined space. But these researchers at Stanford used it to basically explore these spaces that way they would normally have to excavate and essentially destroy, because that's what excavation is, these Incan spaces in Peru. And it's just amazing what this thing can do and the applications that it has. I was totally floored by it. No,
it's really cool. And they, and again, this is where this intersects with Maker, is that they give you instructions for how to build one yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not complicated.
And a basic one that extends out however many feet is pretty easy to make, so you could use that for checking like what things are like in a crawl space. Home applications would be really obvious, like what's inside a wall. Maybe inside a wall would be useful for historic archaeology. But then they also show like how you can make it turn a corner. And the examples they give you for your own use, for your own making at home, involve putting pieces of tape on it so that one edge of this tube is effectively a little shorter than another edge, and you can make it bend as it inflates. But they also had examples, and I don't know how they do this. I wish I had the time to read some of their scholarly articles to find out what the mechanism is for this. But they have examples where they show it snaking around, and basically under their control, go left here, go right there, go up here, down there, around this thing, through that hole, which I think they're targeting search and rescue. They're targeting medical applications, but that would be something great in any of the examples that we've used for going into an archaeological site without destroying anything, going down that little hole to see. So in Petra, we found under the temple, there was a really big sewage canal, basically. And Petra, if you know anything about it, they're really obsessed with water control. And so it was surprising to find this right underneath this big temple, but also not surprising because they have every inch of land there has some effect on, how the water is collected and distributed. So they did GPR at the time, and this is in the mid 90s, in order to try to figure out what the drainage system was like under the temple. And we had some discussion of using robots to explore it, but that never came to fruition. But this vine would be perfect for that. You just plop down in the middle of the temple, put the nose of the vine robot down into the hole that we found in the floor of the temple, and then with the camera on the end, let it go explore, see how far it goes. Where does this go? Is there a cistern under there? I don't know, but with that, we'd be able to find out pretty easily.
Yeah, and it makes me think too that the just on the demo videos from Vine, it looked like scale wasn't really in there in some of those, but it looked like it was about probably 1.5 inches in diameter on the average. This tube that would be sticking out maybe 2 inches, but I think it was more closer between 1 inch and 2 inches. And it made me think. Honestly, couldn't you just make one that was just a few millimeters across? To be honest, if you wanted a camera in there, that might be a problem, but I don't know.
Maybe not with the cameras that they have for arthroscopic surgery.
Sure, yeah. So I don't know. And the camera and everything, you just got to see this video, because the material, the camera, and if they're delivering anything, all of that is inside of this tube as it's being created, and they're just feeding it all out. And you're right. The one thing that I really wish I knew more about was how they make it turn at will. And the only thing I can honestly think of is it's in the camera mechanism. It's some sort of cable system that they can somehow guide and control and steer, like you're snaking a drain almost, you know what I mean? Like something along those lines where you can control that mechanism, and it controls the direction the tube is going. But honestly, I have no idea. So that's pretty neat. Again, check out the show notes, because that's some really cool stuff that they're doing over at Stanford and with those Vine robots. When I think robots in archaeology, honestly, the first thing that comes to my mind is a classic example of underwater robots, autonomous vehicles that, either explore the bottom on their own or are, floating through the air doing like side scanning sonar and stuff like that, different things. But that also makes sense. We've had those for decades, to be honest, because people have been curious about what's under the ocean, and it's a very inhospitable place for humans. So
to say the least.
Exactly. Now, historically, a lot of the spaces that we're talking about, like you're talking about Petra, and down in Peru and other places like that, we've just dug it up. We just gone through the work and spent 20 field seasons out there with students and just dug it up. And I think as stuff like this Vine robots gets going, that's actually going to start probably happening less and less. I mean, unless you're just digging in dense ground, that's one thing. But if you're dealing with structures and potential spaces, then this seems to be the best way to at least start and maybe guide your excavation in a more fruitful way. If you're just looking at empty chambers with no writing and nothing else that you can glean from that data other than the fact that it's a chamber or a passageway or something like that, then maybe we just leave it and then look at other spaces that might have some other potential data sources inside of it so we can learn more about it, which is the whole entire point of excavation to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, whether it's a Vine type robot or some other kind of autonomous or tethered vehicle, the fact that they're now easy enough and cheap enough to make, I think really opens up the doors for some non-destructive exploration, the same way that we use magnetometry or GPR to plan where we're going to excavate. Use this, like you were saying, to pre-assess something, maybe get some primary data on it, but at the very least, easily be able to explore some things that you weren't able to explore before without doing a full excavation, with all the destruction that involves.
Yeah, indeed. So the last thing I want to mention on this from the research I did is the last link in this section, and it's labeled "Archaeology Robots Will Explore Where No Human Can," and it's incredibly poorly named, because when I looked at this, I was like, okay, it's going to be another similar thing to the Vine robots or whatever. And it's very much not. So you got to click on this. And because one of the things they talk about in here was that, archaeologists don't understand exactly how things are made, right? In a lot of cases, like stone tools and stuff like that. And so one of the things that was actually discussed in here, and I looked at this and I actually clicked a few links and dove a little deeper on it, was a robotic arm that was actually built for another purpose, was used to simulate use wear on a projectile point. And they did like 1,000 strokes or something like that on a piece of fabric, all in the same way. And the researcher that did it, he's like, I know humans would normally do it this way, but we have to look at stuff in a controlled environment and then look at variations on that, basically, is what he was saying. And what he means by that is if you're trying to do use wear analysis on something and see how something wears when you're scraping it or cutting with it or doing something like that, a stone tool, it helps to do all your strokes in exactly the same way, so you can get kind of a baseline of what that's going to look like, and then you can see the variation when you put the human element into it. But there's no good way to get a baseline of what 1,000 use wear strokes of scraping a hide or something like that is going to look like with human hands. There's just no way to get a uniform example of what that's going to look like on a baseline. So they use this robotic arm to basically simulate and do the same thing. And I thought that was an incredibly insightful way to use a piece of technology like that basically already exists. They just had to modify the end to hold a stone tool, basically.
Yeah, that basically exists. I know I've said it a few times now, but that to me is where this is all exciting. Taking something that already exists that somebody developed for an entirely different purpose and seeing what you can do with it. Does it have a good archaeological use? I would not have thought of using a mechanical arm for that, but I'm glad somebody did.
I know, right? So, all right. Well, there's a lot of cool things in this space. Type in robots in archaeology in Google and you'll have a fun time at it. There's a lot of really good things being written and a lot of people doing really out of the box thinking on this stuff, which is exactly what we need. Some of it might fail. And I hope they write about that too, because we have to know where not to go. We have to know what directions not to take. And in addition to the directions to take. So both of those are equally important. So, all right. Well, we are going to go on to segment 3 and see what Paul means by art, experimentation, and whimsy. Back in a minute.
America. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. By honoring your sacred vocation of nursing, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. At Grand Canyon University, our online RN to BSN, MSN, or DNP degree programs allow you to balance online coursework with local in-person clinical, practicum, or immersion hours. Find your purpose at GCU. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.
Hi, welcome back to the Architect Podcast, episode number 163. Today we're talking about maker culture and whether and how and in what ways it impacts archaeology. And as Chris said, I put down a whole bunch of different ideas and he kind of categorized them a little bit here. And he lumped these ones together as art, experimentation, and whimsy. And what I was thinking when I first put that down, when I first put those words down was, at the time, 2017, when I wrote this card up, maker spaces were popping up all over the place. And they tended to attract people that were both engineering minded and programming minded and technically minded, but also very artistic, right? So there were a lot of things that were created in these maker spaces that, or around them, or by people who were starting them, that didn't necessarily even have a functional purpose, but they were exploring what you could do with different things. And some of them were just, exciting to see on their own right. But then other things you could stop and think, kind of like that mechanical arm that you were mentioning. Oh, wait, I could use this in a totally different way that might be useful for something else that I want to do. And so, maker spaces, there's Danbury Hacker Space a few miles away from where I am in Danbury, Connecticut. In Philadelphia, one of my old friends, Evan Malone, founded Next Fab Studio.
Nice.
Oh, actually, his partner is Joe Weber, who is of my cohort in grad school, the only other person with the same advisor that year as me. And so she worked in the Middle East. He used to go there every now and then with her to do things like fly kites to take pictures. And I think he built some robots. Anyhow, he's an engineering whiz himself. Is the Reno Collective, where you've worked so much, is that also a maker space, or is that more of a co-working space?
It's primarily a co-working space, but there are a handful of things. They've tried to create a maker space within there for Reno Collective members, but they've only got a couple things. I mean, it's a good start. They only have a few things though, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So it's hard for me to actually grasp exactly, but I love it. Is this intersection between like engineering and computer science and such, which if you do these things, you realize that they're actually highly creative processes. Right. But it's only been in the last few years that people have been really bridging that gap effortlessly, that this, this notion of the stuffy engineer and the totally flighty artist as being two completely incompatible personality types is kind of eroding. A lot of the better engineers I know, certainly a lot of the better computer programmers I know are, flighty artists. And a lot of the flighty artists I know spend a lot of time building robots and other things that fit into the whole maker world. And so I just wanted to, for no particular aim here, I was just like, how do these things enable us as archaeologists, these tools, these techniques, these maker spaces, whatever, how do they enable us to actually explore what might be possible? Right outside of academia, outside of contract archaeology, but in ways that are going to go right back into it.
Right.
And so, as like just odd ideas, I've been seeing. I see on online, like on Instagram and Twitter, there are a number of archaeologists that do things like they take photogrammetry of. There's one that does hill forts, and then for no real research purpose, he'll post these pictures. or these fly arounds of and they're beautiful and people comment on them because aesthetically it's really pleasing. And I think that's a really kind of cool way to make archaeology accessible to people.
Yeah.
Right. To just appeal to their sense of beauty, strangeness, innovation, whatever. Again, I don't even know where I'm going with this idea other than I feel like there's something there that will allow us to be a little more playful about what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is the real takeaway from a lot of what we've been able to talk about is the people that are doing these things are in turn talking about it, right? They're not just writing a paper. They are putting out, YouTube videos. They have Instagram, all kinds of stuff like your friend with the hill forts and then the virtual curation laboratory that we talked about in segment 1. They are putting this stuff out in a way that is accessible to anyone. And it's just it's a really great way to share the science that you're doing. And not only that, but get other people excited about it and make them think that, hey, this might be something that I can do or that I should look into for my research project or for my CRM project or whatever I'm doing. Can this be a thing? I think that's how drones got to where they're at, right? Not only that, but they came way down in price, but people were just really talking about them and promoting them. And then they started coming down in price at the same time, but that's all hand in hand, right? The more people that start using it, the more companies that get into that space and the more competition there is, and competition drives prices down. So it's better for everybody to share that information, share what you're doing, and just get it out there. So not to mention the public archaeology aspect of the whole thing, that's just good too. So anyway.
Now, one of the other things that I put on one of those Trello cards was a discussion of small computers and such, and whether they're going to be used in the field much. I don't even know that I have enough to flesh out a full episode on that, but I'm going to bring it up now. And I'm bringing it up because in case you hadn't guessed by the way I talk about these things that interest me, I like tinkering and programming and designing and inventing, and I'm not good at any of them, but I like it nonetheless. And so on my desk right in front of me as we speak, I've got two different things here. I've got, a whole lot in a little box right next to me, but on the desk, I've got a Raspberry Pi that I'm experimenting with as being a kind of field computer. Very low power. I've mentioned before a programming project I've been working on for total stations. This is going to be the platform for it. I have one working and I've just been going through different prototypes. And, Raspberry Pi is probably the biggest of these SBCs, these single board computers. There are other ones, Beagle boards. Everybody seems to be putting one out. Orange Pi. I think I have an Orange Pi down in a box here. Eric Olson, I gave him one of my old, he's been on our podcast a couple of times. I gave him one of my old Raspberry Pis. Nice. I seem to accumulate these, but I always have this feeling like they're going to be useful in the field. I mean, one of the ideas I've got is that it'd be wonderful when things settle down in Yemen a bit and I've got a little more contract archaeology work under my belt and have a better sense of the public duty aspect of that. To take a bunch of Raspberry Pis, go back to Sayun, Yemen, and talk to the folks I know at the museum there to see if we can set up like a class with local kids to learn some programming and also infuse that with some history and archaeology in their local area.
Yeah.
Maybe some database work, how much I love databases, and let them keep these things afterwards. And then the other one, and this I think really might have a lot of uses. I've got a microcontroller, a Raspberry Pi Pico, and it's basically, you've probably heard of Arduinos. There's a whole bunch of different ones, Teensies and so on. And these are extremely low power. They're not even full computers like the Raspberry Pis are. They're more, sensors that you can program, so you get this little $4 or $5 board, get some power on it, and then put different kinds of environment sensors, movement sensors, cameras, data loggers, whatever. So I'm experimenting with this one. I just want a temperature sensor to build. Now I could go out and buy one for less than it's going to take for me to put this together, but this one is going to be just exactly how I want, built by me, and in a case that I'm going to 3D print. And at the end, I'll say, "Hey, I made that."
Nice. Nice.
I've thought of, once I got that project under my belt, I might make a whole bunch of these for my wife to log light in different parts of our backyard for her garden. right? See, through the course of the day, through the course of a whole growing season, what parts of the yard get more light than others and what times of the day, and does that affect then how we do? But I'm thinking these sorts of things, because they're so accessible now, would be very useful for monitoring environmental data on a site. If you have a site that might be prone to looting, you have a camera hooked up to one. What else? Keeping track of the state of historic structures, right? If you have something that you think is settling, some of these on sensors that you would then be able to check where they are in relation to each other. They use such little battery power. You put them on a long-lasting battery and just set them up in certain places and check on them every couple of months, and you pull the logs from them to find out what's moved.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that is a lot. And
oh yeah,
I'm not into hardly any of that stuff right now, which I really am sad about. I feel like my current situation prevents me from even getting into it a little bit right now too, because you need some parts, you got to store some stuff, but not really then, right? Because if you just pick one thing like Raspberry Pi to get one, learn how to program it, learn how to hook other stuff to it and use it, I think that would be really fun. And it's not just a fun thing to do, but also as you're experimenting and playing with it, like you said, you start to realize, well, what else could I do with this? What else could I attach to this thing? I was thinking in the robot section, man, it's come down to, for probably less than $100, you could buy all the parts and the little electric motors and all the stuff to build yourself a little four-wheeled, probably, robot. And even if it's not something that can be controlled wirelessly through radio signals, but even that is probably super cheap these days, you could build yourself a little thing that could go somewhere and do some stuff. And you just learn through doing that. And I wish more... Well, definitely university programs, but companies as well would allow a little bit more time in the schedule for that kind of creativity. It seems like it's always just go, 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 go. And there's never a chance to really step back and say, where can we push the limits in this area? Where can we push the limits in that area? And what are the possibilities? And just have an afternoon of, creative, there's no wrong suggestion type of discussion and, trying things out. I think, man, that would be so awesome. But I don't know, companies never have they seem to never have the time for that. But I feel like if they made the time for that kind of thing, that it would be incredibly beneficial later on.
Yeah. That was one of the nice things at the school was that we were allowed that space to experiment with things that would maybe help the school. The problem was we were so busy, keeping everything running that we didn't actually have that time. So I have this stored up enthusiasm for playing with things and tinkering. And now that I'm unemployed, I actually have a little bit of time that I've been able to get into these again. It's fun, So I said, I'm unemployed. At some point it's going to hit the wall. But until then, I'm going to learn a little bit and I'm going to build a little bit, and it's going to be a lot of fun. One last idea. We've kind of circled around this a bit, definitely with the mechanical arm. Applications for experimental archaeology. I'm wondering, is there a kind of recipe for this? Because there's so many different, experimental archaeology is a well-known and well-respected part of our field, and people have been doing it in various methods for quite a while. Who over on the Life in Ruins podcast was doing a lot of shooting arrows into carcasses too.
David on the Ethnocynology channel that he's got on Instagram and TikTok and stuff. He's got some great videos and YouTube about doing some stuff like that. He was firing a bow and arrow from a moving truck at targets in one of his videos.
Oh my goodness.
That was impressive. Check that out.
A few years back, I got into home brewing because apparently I need to have every hobby under the sun. But I got into it specifically because beer is so important to ancient Mesopotamia.
Yeah.
Right. And there's the whole debate, which came first, beer or bread and whatnot. And I was like, not only do I drink enough beer, but I like it. And the thought of the process of it, this kind of weird chemistry, biology, something happening was really exciting. So I got into it just to find out what the process was. And, I'm no good at it, obviously, because I try too many things. I'm no good at any of them. But then I was thinking about that. I was like, well, homebrewing, because a lot of the same sort of people who are attracted to the maker spaces and whatnot are also, on all the same homebrew forum. And and it circles right back around. There are Raspberry Pi monitors and computers that you can do to monitor and keep track of your brew process, or actually some of them fully control it from grinding all the way through to actually brewing the beer.
Yeah. I think what you're getting at here, and when you mention applications for experimental archaeology and all this stuff, and like I mentioned earlier, try something, and if you fail at it, that's okay. You still learn something in the process, right? Because what we're doing, the applications for experimental archaeology are all the other things you can possibly think of, right? Because we're trying to, maybe you're tinkering around and you see something about on Discovery Channel about a mechanical arm that can do this, and you're like, hey, wait a minute, I'm trying to replicate use-wear analysis on stone tools. Could I use that arm to do that? It's about staying aware, looking at other technologies, keeping your eyes open, and trying other stuff and figuring out what it's going to be. I think the VR space obviously is going to blow our experimental archaeology up if we can ever get into really kind of tactile, haptic feedback, that kind of thing. We're going to be able to do whatever we want, basically. Stuff that is completely unrealistic to do today, like throw a spear into a woolly mammoth. Like, how does that work? Let's get the dimensions down and see how many people it takes to take this thing down, because we can't do that right now.
Right.
We could try on an elephant, but we'd probably all go to jail. So it's not going to work. But stuff like that is unreplicatable in real space. And so we're going to need VR space to do stuff like that. And I'm sure some of that's being modeled in computers, which is basically VR. But still, I think it comes down to listening to shows like this, not to toot our own horn, but we covered a lot of different things in this episode, and that's the whole point. There's a lot of cool things going on out there, and we only scratched the surface. I mean, we didn't even really get into it. We were high level on this stuff, but there's people really getting into the weeds on these things, and you really just need to keep your eyes open on that stuff. So that's my takeaway.
No, I like that takeaway. I'm jazzed. I'm going to get back to my programming projects right as soon as we're done recording.
Nice. All right. Well, hey, feel free to write us, Chris at archaeologypodcastnetwork.com, Paul at lugal.com. Our contact info is in the show notes. And hit us up on the socials if you want to. Let us know what you're doing, and maybe we'll even bring you on for an episode if you've got a project that you're in the middle of, or you did something and it failed and didn't work. We want to hear about that too. Come on and tell us what your methodology was, and so others can maybe go down a slightly different path, go down a completely different path. Who knows? It would be awesome to hear about all those experiences. So again, hit us up and listen to our back episodes, because we talk about a lot of this stuff in depth on other episodes, especially drones. There's go. One last drink for you.
Oh.
All right. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you next time.
Take care. Thanks for listening to the Archaeotech Podcast. Links to items mentioned on the show are in the show notes at www.archpodnet.com/archaeotech. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com and paul@lugal.com. Support the show by becoming a member at archpodnet.com/members. The music is a song called Off-Road and is license free from Apple. Thanks for listening.
This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV Traveling America, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.
Chicken tacos should only be trusted to chicken professionals. That's where we come in. Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One comes with pico de gallo and creamy chipotle ranch. And the other comes with bacon, lettuce, tomato, and avocado ranch. Chicken experts since 1990. Chicken taco experts since now. Order yours today in the Zax Rewards app. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.